Hello friends, welcome back to Insta School. Today we will be considering the concluding part of Biology 2013 Waec past questions. That is, we'll be considering questions 31 to question 60. I am Lillian and I am one of the tutors at Insta School. Insta School is an online learning platform where you can access educational content anytime and anywhere at your own pace and at the comfort of your home. Please do well to follow us on our social media handle at instaschool_edu on Instagram and on Twitter at instaschool_live. So let's move on to our questions, why questions for biology. We start with the question 31. Question 31 says, which of the following substances is not a complex carbohydrate? When we talk of complex carbohydrates, we're talking of carbohydrates that are made up of long chains, that is, long and complex chains of sugar molecules. We can find complex carbohydrates in foods like bread, rice, and even pasta. Usually, when we consume these complex carbohydrates, they are simplified or broken down into simple sugar or glucose in order to be digested by our body. This glucose, when absorbed by the body, can be used for energy. So we can see that glucose is a simple sugar because it is the last stage of carbohydrate breakdown. So let's go back to our question. We are looking for the option that is not a complex carbohydrate. And as I have just said, glucose is a simple carbohydrate, while glycogen, cellulose, and starch are complex carbohydrates because they are made up of multiple and long complex chains of sugar molecule or glucose molecules. We move on to our question 32. Which of the following association is an example of epiphytism? When we talk of epiphytism, we're referring to a mutualism, that is, a mutualistic association in which one plant lives on the surface of another. So when we take a look at our option, life in human air is out of it because we are referring to plants this time, not animals. Mistletoe is also an animal that is found on citrus fruits, that is, on plants. Egress on cow is also an animalistic association. But when we look at fern on palm tree, sorry about that, mistletoe is also a plant. But what we cannot classify it as living in epiphytic association with citrus fruits is because it lives in a parasitic association and not epiphytic association on citrus fruits. That is, it causes damage. But when we look at our option D, the fern are a type of plant and they stay on palm tree as an epiphytic association. So our answer therefore is option D. An example of epiphytism is fern on palm tree. We look at question 33. What is the likely food of the bird in 1? When we look at the bird in the figure 1, it looks like the beak of a hummingbird. And what do they use these long and slender beaks for? It helps them to extract the nectar, that is, the juice that they can get from flower. And as we may know, most birds also serve as pollinators. So when they extract this juice, they can transfer pollen to another plant or flower. So birds like hummingbirds use this kind of beak to extract nectar. So our answer is therefore option C. Now we are looking at the bird in figure 2. The beak of this bird is a typical grain-eating bird. Like the sparrow, their beak is conical in shape, and it helps them to break the shell of seeds and of grains. So it helps them to consume food like grains such as rice and so on, millet and so on. So our answer is option B. They feed on seed. That's the beak in figure 2. Question 35 says, ecology simply means the study of dash. Well, ecology is a branch under biology, and it studies the relationship between organisms and their environment. That is, it studies the relationship between plants, animals, or humans with their physical environment. That is, the abiotic component of the environment surrounding them. So let's take a look at our option. Option B tells us the answer. That is, the interrelationship between organisms and their environment. And as I just said, plants and animals make up the biotic component, while the abiotic component is composed of temperature, climate, and other things. Ecology studies the relationship between biotic and the abiotic components of the environment. We move on to question 36. The maximum size of a population that a given area can support is known as dash. The average population size in a particular habitat of species is known as the carrying capacity of that habitat. So our answer is option B. The species population size can be limited by some environmental factors such as inadequate food, shelter, water, or even mates. So all of these come down to the fact that the maximum size of a population that a given area can support is known as the carrying capacity of that area. We now move on to question 37. The producers in a food chain in an aquatic environment are dash. In aquatic environment, that is in the water, the autotrophic organisms or organisms that are capable of performing photosynthesis are known as the phytoplankton. These phytoplankton are usually microscopic in nature, and we can find them close to the surface of the water. These phytoplankton convert light or sunlight energy into energy, and also they take in carbon dioxide in order to produce oxygen. That is the same way plants in a terrestrial habitat do. Some example of phytoplankton is the green algae, the cyanobacteria, and the diatoms. So our answer is therefore the option B. Phytoplankton are the producers in a food chain of an aquatic environment. You might think of zooplankton. Zooplankton are actually primary consumers, and this is because they eat up the phytoplankton. So our answer is phytoplankton if we're talking of the producers, while the primary consumers are the zooplankton. Question 38. The frog is considered a better swimmer than the toad because it's dash. Well, we know that toad and frog are examples of animals under the class amphibian, but they have few differences. For example, frogs have smooth and slimy skin. On the other hand, toad have thick and dry skin. And this is majorly due to the fact that the frog stay in water or close to the water for most of the time, while the toad spend more time on land than in water. This can also explain why the frog is a better swimmer than the toad. The toad also have pointy digits, that is, these help them to dig, that is, their claws, claw-like structures, while the frog possess webbed feet that help them to move forward while in water. So we can say that our answer is the option A, because the frog has webbed digits like most animals or birds that stay in water. So answer is our option A. The frog has webbed digits or feet. We look at our question 39. The bacteria that reduces nitrates in the soil into gaseous nitrogen are referred to as dash. When we talk of bacteria that reduces nitrates into gaseous nitrogen, we're talking of the Pseudomonas, the Thiobacillus. They can be found in the soil, and they are examples of denitrifying bacteria. Their major function is to help in converting nitrates or nitrites into nitrogen-containing gases for plants to be able to take in. So our answer is our option B. We move ahead now to question 40. A pyramid of numbers is constructed by dash. What is a pyramid of numbers to begin with? It is a representation, that is, a graphical representation that shows the number of organisms at each trophic level. Usually, in a pyramid of numbers, the organisms at the base, that is, the producers, are the most abundant, while the ones at the top, or the predators, are very little in number. This pyramid ensures that there is enough plants or producers at the bottom to produce food for the consumers. We can construct this pyramid of number by taking into account the number of organisms in a particular habitat. And how do we achieve this? It is by taking a population census or a head count of different organisms in a particular habitat. So our answer is our option C, conducting a population census. We move on to question 41. The main reason for immunizing children is to dash. Why do we vaccinate and immunize our children? Usually, vaccination is given to children either by injecting or orally. And it is done to immunize them in order for them to resist or be resistant to certain deadly diseases such as polio or measles. The vaccines are targeted to get to the immune system in order to produce antibodies that target a particular disease. So we have different vaccines for different diseases. For example, the vaccine for polio, the measles vaccine, and even COVID vaccine. These are done in order for the immune system to produce antibodies in order to fight against these diseases. So our answer is our option C. The immunization is done to stimulate the production of antibodies in the immune system. We now move on to our question 42. Rhizobium, which lives in the root nodules of leguminous plants, is an example of the association known as dash. Rhizobium is a bacteria and it lives in a type of association known as symbiotic or mutualistic association with the roots of leguminous plants. And this association ensures that each of them benefits from each other. So the rhizobium helps to fix the nitrogen in the atmosphere and convert it to ammonia in order for the plant to be able to absorb. On the other hand, the plant provides food and shelter for the bacteria. So we can say that our answer is option C. It is a mutualistic association under saprophytes or under symbiotics, sorry. We move on to question 43. Ascaris lumbricoides is a parasitic dash. Ascaris lumbricoides is a species of roundworm and they fall under the invertebrate phylum Nematode. Usually, these roundworms affect the small intestine of humans, and we know that when an animal causes harm to another animal or organism, it lives or it is in parasitic association with that organism. And these ascaris gets into our body when we eat with dirty and contaminated hand, when we consume fruits or vegetables that have not been properly washed, properly peeled, or even cooked. When someone is infected with ascaris, it causes a lot of discomfort and pain. So back to our question, Ascaris lumbricoides is a parasitic roundworm under the phylum Nematode. We move on to our next question, 44. The following organisms are pests of plants except dash. Plant pest refers to animals that can cause attack to plants or plant products. Some of plant pests are rodents, that is, the rats and the rabbits. We also have birds. Birds usually target plant products. We can also say that worms affect plants. So the odd one out of our option is bacteria. And bacteria is not a plant pest because it is actually a causal agent of some crop diseases. Not only bacteria but fungi and virus causes diseases to plants. These microorganisms causes disease such as cassava mosaic, tomato rot on different plants and plant products. So we can say that the odd one out is bacteria. So our answer is option C. We move on to question 45. The absence of alimentary canal in the parasitic flatworm can be attributed to the fact that dash. Flatworms such as the tapeworm are under the phylum Platyhelminthes. These flatworms are usually parasitic, and this is because they live within or on another organism. For example, we can find flatworm in the gastrointestinal tract of humans. They get most of their nutrients from these tracts while causing damage or affecting the organism negatively. One of the characteristics of these flatworms is that they have an incomplete digestive system with no alimentary canal. Usually, they consume their food through their mouth. They break it down in the gut, and the digestive system passes it through all their body in order for the nutrients to be even across their bodies. The unused food comes out through their mouth, and this is because they do not have anus for ingestion like humans do. So we can see that their body helps in absorbing digested food, and this is why they do not have a need for alimentary canal. We move on to our question 46. Which of the following statements is not a reason for conserving wildlife? Conservation of wildlife simply refers to protecting our animals, plants, and also their natural habitat. We need to conserve wildlife in order to ensure continuity of life. That is, they should continue living and not go into extinction. Conservation of wildlife is also a means to generate revenue for a country. That is, it becomes tourist attraction. Tourists come into the country to watch this wildlife in their natural habitat, and these generate income and revenue for a particular country. Wildlife also ensure, when we conserve our wildlife, it ensures that there is enough food and resources even for generations to come. Now, after analyzing all of this, which of these options do you think is the odd one out? We already said that it attracts tourists into the country. It serves as a source of food. It also serves as a source of income. But conserving wildlife does not increase the amount of rainfall. So our answer is option D. We now move on to question 47. Which of the following human activities would help prevent endangered species from extinction? When we talk of endangered species, these are the species that are on the brink of going extinct. It is very important that we conserve the wildlife. And some of the ways we can do this is by protecting the national parks or the natural habitat of these wildlife. For example, creating zoos and protecting these zoos. The government can also create laws that prohibit the unlawful clearing of bushes or illegal killing of certain species. So we can look at our option and say that our option C goes well with our answer. That is maintenance of species in zoological gardens. We now move on to question 48. In genetics, linkage refers to the linking of genes of the dash. When we talk about linkage in genetics, we are referring to the close association of genes that are on the same chromosome. So the closer two genes are to each other on the chromosome, the greater the probability of being inherited together. So let's take a look at our option. In genetics, linkages refer to the linking of genes of the same chromosomes. We move on to question 49. A man's blood group is AB. What is the probability of the man giving birth to a child with blood group O? If a man is in blood group AB, there is no chance or possibility of him giving birth to a child with the O blood group. And this is because for a child to have a O blood group, both of his parents should have an O blood group. That is, the mother can either be AO or BO. The father has to also be either AO or BO in order for the child to inherit the O blood group. So our answer is 0%. There is no probability of this man giving birth to a child with blood group O. We move on to question 50. When a man who is Rh positive marries a woman who is Rh negative, there will be an incidence of dash. This question is a case of rhesus incompatibility, because at the time of conception, the Rh factors of the mother and that of the baby usually do not match, because the mother's Rh negative immune system will produce antibodies that will attack the baby who is Rh positive. So usually, when the blood of the mother and the baby mix, that is, or when the placenta breaks away at birth, usually sicklers or sickle cell anemia and mutation of the genes. Sorry about that. Our answer is option A. And why I say so is because this is rhesus incompatibility. When we look at our other options, sickle cell anemia and albinos, these are simply mutation of the genes and they can be transmitted from parents to offspring. So the issue of rhesus incompatibility can bring about complications in pregnancy, which can also lead to stillbirth. Our answer is therefore our option A. We move on to question 51. The genotypic ratio of the offspring ratio is 1:2:1. Which of the following laws illustrate this ratio? Gregor Mendel proposed 3 laws of inheritance: the law of segregation, the law of dominance, and the law of independent assortment. The law of dominance states that when two traits come together in one hybrid pair, the two characters or alleles do not mix with each other. Rather, they are independent of each other and they express only the dominant allele. So this law supports the phenotypic ratio of 3:1. That is, the law of dominance is out of our option. Let's take a look at our option. Now that the law of dominance is out, the law of use and disuse was proposed by Lamarck and not Mendel. The law of linkage was also not proposed by Darwin. So we are left with the law of segregation. What does the law of segregation state? It states that two alleles will be separated from each other during meiosis. This will cause the two alleles located on the chromosome to segregate from one another. So let's say that two heterozygous allele was crossed. The result will bring about the ratio 1:2:1, and this simply shows the law of segregation. You can try that. Well, our answer is option C. The law of segregation brings about the ratio of 1:2 to 1. We move on to the next question. Question 52. A gene that is only located on the X chromosome is said to be dash. When we talk of the X chromosome, we're referring to the sex-linked chromosome because it is the 23rd pair of chromosome and it is responsible for the determination of the sex of the offspring. Usually in the female, such as humans, the male has the X and the Y chromosome, while the female has only X chromosome on the both chromosome. So we can say that this X chromosome is said to be sex-linked because it is responsible for determining the sex of an offspring. We now move on to question 53. If a boy has blood type O and the mother has blood type A, what is the genotype of his father? In order for a child to have blood type O, his parents must have the blood group O included in their blood group. So this means that if the mother has blood type A, the father must have an O in his blood group. So the father can either be AO or BO in order for the child to have a blood type O. So from our answer, which of these option has O? Option C, AO. We move on to question 54. A man who suffers from hemophilia marries a woman who is a carrier. What percentage of their children are likely to be hemophilic? Hemophilia is a condition that affects the body's ability to clot blood, especially after an injury. A female can only be a carrier, while a male can either be a sufferer or neutral. So now we construct a Punnett square. When we cross these two alleles, we come about one hemophilic boy and one hemophilic girl that is a carrier. So when we go back to our option, we have 50% because only 2 of their children will show the trait of hemophilia, while the others will be neutral. So we move on to our next question. Question 55. Which of the following traits may be considered in marriage counseling? In marriage counseling, a very important factor to consider alongside genotype is the rhesus factor. This will also avoid complications for the babies that will produce from the union of the couple. So, in order to avoid rhesus incompatibility, marriage between rhesus Rh negative female and marriage between Rh negative female and Rh positive male must be avoided completely because this can prove fatal. So, a very important factor to consider in marriage counseling is the rhesus factor. We move on now to question 56. Which of the following structures is only formed during cell division in animals? During the mitotic nuclear division, 2 identical daughter cells are formed. Now, these identical daughter cells contain the same number of chromosomes as their parent cells. These 2 daughter cells are joined at a point by a structure known as the centromere. So which of these shows the centromere? The centrosome, sorry. Our option C. This centrosome joins the two daughter cells at a point, and these two daughter cells are a product of cell division, mitotic cell division. We move on to our next question, 57. The function of the drone in a colony of bees is to dash. The drone in the bee colony refers to the male honeybee, and their major function is to mate with the unfertilized queen, and this helps for continuity of life. This is because this drone mates with the queen in order to form new colony of bee. So we move back to our question. The function of the drone in a colony of bees is to mate with the queen. Now we move on to the next question, question 58. Which of the following features is used by the chameleon to escape predation? Due to the fact that chameleons move slowly, they are able to change in order to blend in with their environment. This helps them to avoid predator, and this blending in is a form of camouflage. This is an adaptive feature of coloration in chameleon. So which of these suits our answer? Option D, adaptive coloration helps chameleons to escape their predators. We now move on to our next question, 59. A scientist who was involved in the evolutionary theory was dash. Aside Charles Darwin, another scientist who was involved in proposing evolutionary theory is Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Lamarck propounded laws such as the laws of inheritance of acquired characteristics, laws of use and disuse, and law of increase in complexity of organisms. So we see that Lamarck is another scientist who was involved in the evolutionary theory. Our answer is therefore our option A. We now move on to the last question, question 60. Darwin noticed that organisms in similar habitats across the world looked alike. This illustrates dash. Darwin was able to come up with the theory of convergent evolution. That is, different species, especially species that have different ancestors, evolved similarly due to the fact that they share the same habitat. For example, the fin of a fish and the fin of dolphin perform the same function despite the fact that they have different ancestors. Also, bats have wings the same way birds do, even though they evolved differently. So we can say that convergent evolution is what Darwin used to explain the fact that organisms that stay in similar habitats look alike, even though they may have different ancestral lineage. Thank you so much for joining us till the end of the consideration of 2013 Waec past question. This is still Insta School, and in case you've not been following us, follow us on our social media handle at instaschool_edu on Instagram and at instaschool_live on Twitter. I'll see you next time.